Hey there, Alex here. For those of you new to Behind the Podium, I just want to give you a heads up that we do use adult language. You'll definitely want to grab a pair of headphones if there are kids around or you're at work. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. Problem solvers have problems too. So here at Behind the Podium, I, Jared Cohen, and my co-host Alexander Ellis discuss the struggles, philosophies, demands, and practices of the coach, or said more broadly, health and wellness practitioner. To provide quality coaching is to enhance someone's life in an everlasting and unfolding way. This is not easy and requires a lot of due diligence and self-mastery on the part of the coach to be able to perform. So without further ado, join us as we dig deeper into the depths of the coach's mind. Welcome back, or welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. I am Jared Cohen with my partner in crime,
Alexandra Ellis.
And today we go behind the podium with a coach, martial artist, military man, swimmer, dog lover, motorcyclist, business owner, husband, and rebel against any one way. Specifically, this guest of ours is the owner and head instructor at Rebellion Martial Arts Academy, which teaches Jeet Kune Do, Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, and the Filipino martial arts of Eskrima, Arnis, and Kali. He has over 30 years of martial arts training with black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, and Kempo Karate, and possesses instructor certifications in Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do and Filipino martial arts. As alluded to above, our guest spent 6 years serving in our country's military in various Ranger, Airborne, and Light Infantry units. He left the Army in 2001. Without further ado, it is mine and Alex's pleasure to welcome Jeff Baldwin of Rebellion Martial Arts Academy to Behind the Podium.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is our first guest within the martial arts sphere of coaching. We have had other guests on that are martial art dabblers, but I don't think they would consider themselves martial art coaches or instructors. So it is a pleasure to have you add to our catalog of coaching interviews.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured a place we would start is with one of our usual rapid fire questions, but instead of leaving it without any elaboration, we would kick it off here and then kind of riff on this question a little bit depending on your answers. So,
okay.
What are some of your coaching and or teaching pet peeves within the realm of martial arts?
Do you mean coaching from the perspective of the student? Like, what are my pet peeves about students or trainees?
Let's actually start with what are your pet peeves of potentially other coaches in the field? Yeah.
So in some of the circles that I run in, there seems to be a lot of enabling of excuse making for performance, for like maybe lackluster performances. I'll give you an example. I was at a competition with one of my students. He's what they would consider in the masters division. So he was like 32, I think, 32 or 33. And when he signed up for the competition, there weren't a whole lot of competitors in his age category. So he dropped down into the adult category to get more matches. And he ended up fighting this another gentleman that had done the same thing. And so after my student had beaten him, I overheard his coach, saying, oh, don't worry, this guy's, younger than you are. So, I mean, it's okay. And he even turned to my student and said, how old are you? And he said 32 or something like that, which is 2 years, basically 2 years younger than this other guy. And you see the coach kind of get this disappointed look on his face, and he said, see, you're older than him, and it was like, I'm like, seriously? Like you can't. So my pet peeve is with other coaches, like, don't bring attention to things that you can't control. So if you're going to identify areas that you're going to be able to improve on, then you have to be able to identify the things that you have an effect on. So age is not one of those things. Right. I can't stop time, and I can't roll back the clock. So all I can do is try to do the best with what I have. And so I think it's important, like if you put it into a fitness context, if you're trying to increase a maximum lift, then something to focus on is not your age, and whatnot.
Yeah.
Or if you have a physical limitation, if you've got, I've working with soldiers and stuff like that, I've got amputees and stuff like that I've worked with, and you have what you have. And it's like, you can't sit there and focus on, well, only if I had, the bottom part of my leg, I'd be able to squat more, and it's like, well, it doesn't do any good to focus on that. We can only focus on the things that we can change. And so I think one of probably my biggest pet peeve in the coaching world is focusing and fixating on things that you have no effect on, that there's no way that you can change that thing. So all you can do is focus on your performance and kind of look at specifically in a match or a competition or a fight, you can specifically try to focus and zero in on the place where you kind of lost control, and it doesn't matter how old you are or how fast you are or how big you are or what your physical limitations are. What matters in martial arts is, where did you go wrong? What could you have done better in that instance, right, in order to change potentially the outcome of the situation? So I think there's I have it in my brain. It's kind of a crass, but but they call it in the jiu-jitsu circles, they'll call it bitch assness. And it's like you're bitching about something that you have no effect over, right? So you have no effect, and so it's not even healthy to even focus on that.
Right.
So you focus on the things that you can change. You go away, and you learn from from the failure, right? From where you went wrong. You might have had a moment of inactivity. You might have done the wrong technique or the wrong movement at that point. You might have taken a chance and gambled a bit, and maybe you shouldn't have. But those are things that you can affect. Don't fixate or focus on anything that you don't have the ability to change. I do the same thing in my personal life. Something bad happens, and however horrible it might be, I can't fixate on what happened. Right. I can only fixate on how I'm going to respond to that thing. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be anything, a car accident. You can't change what happened. You can only affect how you're going to deal with it going forward.
Yeah. And I think too, so many people nowadays, because I was just speaking with my friend yesterday about business, and I'm in the process of launching a new online program, and how so many people are afraid to fail. And once they do fail, they're like, oh, well, I'm done. And they'd rather just like walk away than, like you're saying, go back, look at, where did mistakes happen? What can you change so that next time it's different? And I just see that again and again, where people are not willing to take the risk that maybe they will fail on, because that's where the learning and the growth happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was alluding to earlier when I said, which perspective do you want?
Yeah.
and it's like when I'm talking about my students, the biggest thing is they run into a wall and they quit.
Yeah.
I've actually heard people say, well, I guess I'm not meant for that.
Right.
And I'm like, man, you're not meant for anything.
Yeah.
You're meant to consume oxygen or to convert oxygen and consume food and procreate. That's what we're meant to do. That you're not meant to do anything other than that. So whatever you choose to do over that, that's on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me then that that's definitely something that would frustrate me and would sadden me to think about other coaches that are influencing that kind of thought process just by making excuses on behalf of their students, and especially in the context of martial arts where so much of it is the uncontrollables, and the essence, I feel like, of becoming a good martial artist is the ability to not fixate on those things and continually adjust and adapt to the circumstances as they come about. So it's interesting to hear that you've experienced coaches in that domain that are articulating things that are opposite of that ethos.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a I don't know. It's a protection mechanism, a survival mechanism,
right?
To make ourselves feel better, to automatically default to that right away, making excuses to make ourselves feel better about a situation, finding a way to cope with it instead of facing it head on.
Right.
And it's sad. What the coach should be doing is turning that person away from thinking in that method instead of enabling it.
Yeah, exactly. How have coaches and mentors of yours shaped your approach to coaching?
Wow. So, man, I've trained.
You've had a lot.
So 35 years I've been training. When I was young, it was more. I didn't really think about the coaching and stuff and how I was being coached. It was just something that I did. So I've been all over the world, and I've had all kinds of martial arts instructors. I've had private lessons with, world class competitors, and it's interesting to see the difference. Well, let's back up. Let's say we look at it from an academic standpoint in college, for instance. You have professors and you have coaches, right? So the coaches for the athletic team, and then you have the professors for your college classes and whatnot.
Right.
Now, some college professors, they show up and they give their class or their whatever's on the syllabus for that day, and they sit up there and they lecture and they talk and they hope that you're listening. And some students will just put a recorder out there and just record the whole thing because it's not that engaging. The instructor, the professor, doesn't seem to really care whether or not you're going to get it. And part of it is he's got 50 plus students in that class, and he can't afford to spend time with 50 students. So he's just teaching. He's just teaching to the mass. And so you have people that are very, very knowledgeable, and if you know the questions to ask, they're a treasure trove of knowledge. As long as you know what questions to ask.
Right, interesting.
Right? But they're not good coaches. And part of being a coach is recognizing where that person needs assistance and where they're lacking, and being able to zero in on that area that's going to make that person a better whatever, right? A better competitor, a better practitioner. Also knowing that person's goals. That's part of being a coach, is knowing the person's goals and being able to tailor the program specifically for them. So, having those professors that are really extremely knowledgeable, but then they lack that ability to coach.
Right.
Either they've been tainted in some way throughout their experiences because they've maybe put a lot of time and effort into mentoring somebody and then had that person either quit or go to train with somebody else after you put all that time and effort into them. It's maybe soured them, so that makes them not really want to coach anybody anymore. But so how that's formed me is I've had really bad coaches who were really good practitioners, very good. I've had instructors that were encyclopedias. Like you could ask them anything and they had a pretty good answer for it, but they were, specifically horrible coaches.
Yeah.
And then I've had the reverse of that. People who, and I had one coach in Canada after I got out of the Army, I went home, to Vermont to help my mother with some things. And, I would drive to Canada to train at this school in Montreal. And there was a Brazilian instructor there for Jiu-Jitsu. And this guy had been training since he was 4 or 5 years old. So he would do things like he didn't even know he was doing. Like he was demonstrating a move one time, and I had to tell him, I was like, hey, when you put your hand here, what are you accomplishing with that? And he goes, oh, I don't put my hand there. And I was like, yeah, you do. You just did. And he's like, no. And I go, yeah. And he's like, no. And I said, can you do the move again? And he's like, yeah. And so he starts doing the move again. I go, stop. And he was like, oh, like he didn't even realize he was doing this thing because he'd been doing it since he was like 5, But the man was a fantastic coach. Like I took private lessons with him, and my very first private lesson, he didn't even ask me what I wanted to work on. I just showed up, and he said, okay, I've watched you, and this is what you seem like you like to do. So here's the direction we're going to head with you. I want to show you this. And he completely took the reins and said, you're going to go this way. You're going to do this thing. And that had a huge impact on, even to this day, how I perform in that art and the things that I go towards. So he was totally spot on.
Wow.
in giving me this skill, right, or direction in my training, because it's still one of my favorite things, to do. But he really didn't know, he wasn't aware enough, I guess, to know some of the things that he was doing that would have impact on the way the technique was performed, because he'd been doing it for so long. He was just not aware of it. He just performed, So it's like when you jump into the car and what do you do first? Put your key in the ignition or put your seatbelt on or adjust your mirror? Which one of those things do you do first? And you might have to sit there. I can see you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Because you've done it so many times, you have to think, like, what do I do,
Yeah.
And you could easily tell me, but you have to think about it.
Right.
And so that's where this guy was. He was doing things that he had done his whole life, and he just didn't even think about doing them. So when it came time to teaching that to somebody else, he needs to go back and figure out how to do it. But from a coaching perspective, he cared enough. He cared enough, and he was attentive and observative enough, to be able to say, man, I see that you like to do this, and this is where we need to take you. So that was fantastic. And I had one coach that let me do a move on him at near 100%, over and over and over for an hour until I got it. Mm. And literally, this guy was literally sacrificing his body for me.
Wow.
And so that was amazing. And I felt really bad, but he kept on egging me on with that. I had a Muay Thai coach let me kick him in the leg almost as hard as I could, and he kept on telling me harder, and I just wouldn't kick him as hard as I could. But I got to the point where it was 80, 85, 90% of what I could do. And then he blocked my kick with his shin.
You're like,
That was a good lesson.
Yeah.
So how that formed me is I want to take the best of both worlds. I want to be the guy that somebody can come up and, the coach that somebody can come up and ask a question to, and and I'll know the answer.
Right.
You know, maybe it won't be the best answer, but it's an answer, right? And typically how I handle questions like that is I'll just tell them what I do.
Yeah.
You know, this is what I do. You know, let's try this. But I also want to be the coach that's attentive and caring enough that I want you to achieve your goals, and I want to make you better. I had an instructor that he was selling a block of private lessons, and it was $1,000 for 10 private lessons, right? And so I told him, I said, okay, I'll buy some private lessons from you, you know, but what I want to do with these lessons is I want you to train me, you know, like a personal trainer would train somebody.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when you go to a personal trainer, you don't show up and then they go, okay, what do you got? What do you want to work on? And it's like, that's what I'm paying you for, you know?
Right.
But in martial arts, a lot of times people will take lessons because they have specific questions and stuff. And then instructors can kind of get roped into that way of doing things. So I wanted to make sure before I gave this guy $1,000 that I was going to get what I wanted out of the training. And I said to him, I want you to train me. And I said, I have a training partner that he's willing to come with me to the training if you don't want to participate in the training. And I said, so can you do that? And he said, yeah, I can do that. So I gave the guy $1,000. And then about a week later, we scheduled our first lesson. And I said at the time I scheduled, I said, do you want me to bring a training partner? And he said, no, it's fine. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. You know, so I show up for the lesson. He comes down, he kind of, you know, does some mobility, you know,
Neck
movements
stuff.
with his neck, shoulders, you know, and then he goes, okay, what questions do you have? And I was just like, and I was really disappointed.
Yeah.
And he still owes me 9 private lessons because I never took it. Yeah. I was really disappointed. I did get a lot out of that lesson because I was so mad. I asked a question that I had felt like I didn't deserve to ask before, and so I got some good information because I was emboldened by my anger. But yeah, so I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to. So I take some pieces of both sides. Like I want to be a great coach, but I also want to be a great professor. And so I try to be the best of both of those things for my clients and my students. So those are the things, both good and bad, you know?
Right.
Would you say in general, because I was thinking back to the coach that you worked with in Quebec, when you work with people, do you already have a plan for them based on what you think that they need? Or are you asking them, what do you want to work on? Or is it some balance of the two? I mean, it seems like it kind of would be a balance based on your past experiences.
Yeah, definitely a balance. Like, for example, most of I have a few clients who do 2 lessons per week. You know, so typically with those people, what we'll do is we'll have one lesson, and these guys are mostly advanced people, and so we'll do one lesson where we'll basically spar for a half hour out of the hour, and then I'll critique them based on the sparring that we've done. So we'll do 30 minutes where we're sparring, and then I'm paying attention to how they're reacting, what they're reacting with, the timing on certain moves, and where I can see improvements can be made. And then we'll spend the last 30 minutes kind of going over those things, and whether it's a technical aspect or working through a transition to sharpen the timing on it. And then typically the second private lesson that week will be a question and answer, because usually these guys are also training on their own. So they're usually pretty serious. So they're out there outside of my view where I can't watch them. They're training, and so they may have questions maybe specific to that training partner or stuff that's happening when they're not, working with me specifically. And so we'll do a two lessons where one's Q&A, repping specific movements, stuff like that, where I'm just able to closely monitor how they're doing techniques. And then the other one's more performance-based, where they're essentially trying to kill the coach. and then I'm just paying attention to how they're doing that, where they're slipping up. Sometimes it's a conditioning thing. Sometimes it's just analysis paralysis. They'll stop fighting for a moment to analyze this situation that they're in, and that leaves them behind. But it is on a typical private lesson, it's a little bit of both. We'll do some specific situational sparring where I can observe them kind of in a vacuum, so to speak. And then if they have questions specific to their personal training outside of that lesson, then we'll cover that stuff. But yeah, it's a little bit of a combination of both.
And how did you develop the skill to be able to both be like literally in the ring participating, but also like outside of the ring watching what's happening to be able to provide feedback? Because when I'm coaching and when I'm teaching, like I'm watching, I'm not doing it at all. Like that's a whole nother level of like super skill.
Yeah, it's they're two separate things. So you have to have that skill to be able to watch something and then be able to see, because it's a whole different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Being involved in the situation, you don't have the perspective. So I have to combine my my observation skills from outside of what's going on, and then also my sensitivity or my ability to feel what that thing that I had seen looks like, right? And so I need to be able to feel what the thing that I've seen from the outside feels like to know. So it's really hard to explain. Where you're a yoga instructor, so you can tell when you're in a pose what it should feel like.
Right.
But you can also tell, because of your experience as a coach, what you feel should look like as well.
Right.
And it's very similar, I would imagine very similar to that, where I know when I'm in there in the action, I know what the thing that he's doing should feel like on the receiving end of it, where I'm receiving it. I know where I'm limited, where I'm not limited. If it should be tighter here than it is there. I've felt it enough being done on me correctly, that I know what doing it feels like, and I know what getting it done to me should feel like. But I also then, from the outside of the situation, I also know what it should feel like. One of the instructors that had taught me how to teach, he said that people learn in different ways. Some people need to feel something. Some people need to see it, right? And then some people need a little bit of both, right? And then the fourth way is people need to explain to them. So they have an auditory form of learning where they can they understand their bodies enough where you can tell them, hey, contract this muscle, move this knee here, and so you have to be able to teach in all of those ways. I have to be able to let you feel the move. I need to be able to show you the move, and I need to be able to let you and explain the move to you. And then I also need to be able to make you or let you perform the move so you can kind of develop the groove for it, so to speak. I think it's a combination of coaching and also performing the techniques. And I spend a lot of time looking at video footage of competitions and elite, the elite performers applying their trade and picking apart the little subtle nuances that maybe somebody else wouldn't see. But it's a combination of both, being the practitioner myself, and then also knowing what it should look like, should feel like, that kind of thing.
Very cool.
Do you remember the time, or was there a specific time where you had a little bit of a shift in identity as it related to like going from being this student versus like thinking about yourself as someone that is teaching others? Or I guess maybe did it accompany a shift in training, or a shift in the priority of training, where you were then kind of no longer training just for the intention of how you were improving your skills, but how you could better understand the skills to relay them to someone else?
I wouldn't say that there was a like a moment.
Yeah.
It's been and it continues to be an evolution of the way that I think. I mean, for instance, when I was just a practitioner, I was only worried about me, and so I didn't really have to focus on how anybody else learned.
Right.
And if somebody came to me and asked me, hey, how do I handle this situation? I literally would just say, this is how I handle it. This is what I do there.
Yeah.
And then that's how it started, because I didn't have a good answer for them. I only had the answer for me, right? And so it was just, here's what I do. And then I would show them the best I could do, best I could show them what I did. Now, my attributes might differ from theirs. My strengths and weaknesses might differ from theirs. So in that context, the technique or that whatever they do in that situation can change based on their strengths and weaknesses. So it's a constant evolution, because as I learn more and I experience more and I fail more, it constantly evolves the way that I teach people. I think the biggest shift for me is understanding that not everybody is like me.
Yeah, right.
So not everybody learns the same way that I learn. Not everybody looks at things the same way. Sometimes and I've been doing this, like I said, 35 years, I get questions from students that I was like, what? I never even crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And so I have to sit there and go, like, man, like, what's going on in this person's head that they came to that conclusion. And so, I mean, I have to understand not everybody hears things the same way I do.
Right.
Not everybody looks at things the same way I do, and not everybody has the same drive or focus that I have. Some people have, obviously people speak a different language than you do, so there's a language barrier sometimes, and so sometimes what I say might not be what they hear, even if we both speak English,
Right.
Even if English is both of our first languages, sometimes it doesn't, the words that I use don't mean the same thing.
Has that been I feel like that's another really interesting topic, because martial arts is so international, right? And these disciplines that I described that you have built a repertoire with all come from different nationalities and cultural backgrounds. Has that been an education in of itself, just to kind of see the different sort of nuances of how certain methodologies are taught based on the culture or language of origin?
Definitely. I mean, I tell this story a lot, that I had my first Brazilian instructor, right? He used to say, sorry, I have my dog in my lap right now. He's healing from surgery.
Oh, little nugget.
So
cute.
So he's napping on me. But I tell this story a lot. He used to say, "Don't let him do that." and I joke, because it was he had a thick Brazilian accent, and I would say, "Hey, coach, what do I do when they do this?" And he goes, "Don't let them do that."
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but he did it. And he goes, "Don't let him."
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but he did it. It's already done. He's like, "Don't let him." And I go, but he's already there. And he goes, "No." And I'm like, man, Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's already there. Like, he's already gotten to that position. What do I do? And he goes, don't let him do it. I'm like, okay, but let's say it's you. And he goes, well, it's me. Yeah. So you're going to get there. And he goes, yeah, what you going to do? And I'm like, okay. And so at first I'm like, man, this guy's hiding from me. Like he doesn't want to tell me, he's hiding the moves. And, but after training for a long time, and it took me a while before I understood this, and other people may have quit, like thinking this guy's not gonna show me the real moves because he's trying to, dance around the issue and not teach me. But what I understood from his understanding of our language, right? What I started to understand. So when I say to you, don't let him do that, you're thinking, stop the thing from even happening, right?
Right.
And what his perception of don't let him do that was whatever he has done, undo it. Right? So if somebody grabs my wrist and the coach says, don't let him do that, what he means is undo this, break that grip. Right? But what you hear is,
don't let it happen in the first place.
Don't let him do that. And I'm like, it's done.
Yeah.
Grab my wrist.
It's a whole temporal issue.
Yeah, and so like when he was saying don't let him, and I'm like, okay, well he already did it, and you're like, yeah, don't. He's like, don't let him do it.
Wow, fascinating.
And then I go, okay, well you did it. Let's say you grabbed my wrist, and he goes, well, it's me, so what you gonna do?
Right.
Like basically, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna undo it. You're not gonna be able to break the grip because I'm better than you. So what you gonna do? And so I was like, oh my god, and so.
Wow.
Having situations like that, where, the student doesn't understand the instructor,
right?
And vice versa. He doesn't understand what I'm saying, and I don't understand what he means. And it presents a challenge. And so, like I said, when we, that sometimes you got to hear things 7 times, 7 ways, from 7 different people before it makes sense.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm constantly, buying instructional DVDs and watching videos online of different instructors teaching stuff that I already know.
Yeah.
And most of the reason why I'm watching those things is because I want to see if this guy's got a different way of teaching what I do. Right? Because if I can steal that, then that's going to help my students, because there might be that one student who's not picking up what I'm putting down. Right? I'm teaching it a certain way. He's not getting it. Like, it's not, I had to fire an instructor that taught for me one time because the students didn't like going to his class because they felt like he was disappointed in them.
Oh, wow.
when they didn't perform optimally.
Yeah.
Right? And from talking to the coach, right, from talking to that instructor, it's not that he's upset with them, he's upset with himself.
Yeah.
He was upset with his seemingly lack of ability to get that student to perform properly.
Right.
And that frustration would come out in his voice to the student, right? And so the student would think, oh, he's frustrated with me, I must suck.
Right.
Like, I can't believe I made the coach so angry, I must suck at this. Maybe I should not train anymore, that kind of thing. And it's like I had, some coaching moments with him where I needed to kind of, hey, try to keep your emotion under control. Sometimes people learn a different way, and you can't let that frustration come out in your voice. And like, he wasn't getting it. Like, he had trouble controlling it because he was a very good practitioner, and he was a very good coach when he had the right audience.
Right.
When
their context is similar.
You have that one person that needs to hear it a different way. Like, he had 1 or 2 ways to present the information, and if you didn't get it, then weren't going to get it, and he would get frustrated because the other people in the class were getting it and you weren't. And he's like, man, what is wrong with me that I can't get this person to perform this properly? And that frustration, that disappointment in himself would come out in his voice and be projected onto the client. And so I eventually had to take over his class because people stopped attending in the class because he made them feel bad about it,
That's fascinating.
So, I mean, yeah, it's a constant evolution.
Yeah, I love that idea too, that you're talking about as a part of your own practice of becoming a better coach. Like you're watching instructional videos of other coaches doing stuff you already know, and the purpose isn't necessarily about for your sake, but rather catching different cues, different cueing, different framing of experiences that may be novel or add a little color to how someone else is going to digest it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's just a different process in the focus because there's a lot of different moving parts.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, if I put it in an athletic context, it's like teaching something like a snatch or a clean and jerk, right? It's like, where do you start with that? And different coaches might start in different areas.
Yeah, for sure.
There might be a generally accepted way of teaching it.
Yeah.
And then there might be different focuses. I wouldn't know. I'm just spitballing, but
no, 100%. And I think the other piece of that too is that I think about a lot is like the sequencing of what you're teaching, right? And what's the order of operations that you walk someone through so that when it's all said and done, the sum is greater, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think sometimes maybe a misunderstanding just comes from the order in which somebody was given those pieces. And to your point, the various focal points. Well, I realized that I didn't give context at the beginning of our call to the general audience about my relationship to Jeff. Former listeners, or regular listeners rather, of former yeah. Hope we don't have former listeners. Regular listeners of former episodes might be familiar with the many times, actually, I think I have brought up my experiences training under Jeff and the training that I was fortunate enough to get at Rebellion Academy in San Diego. And so it's really cool to get you on and dig deeper into this within our context here of unveiling the coach. And one of the things I actually believe I mentioned in a previous episode we did was this conversation you and I had one time about the difference between coaches that merely coach or teach in a way that mimics the experience they had and are almost like kind of beholden to it. I feel like this is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is pretty similar within like the military space where there's a big amount of loyalty to, this is the sort of struggle that I had to face. So now it is my duty to replicate that struggle for you. And what I really liked that you said was you've identified for yourself that you take a different philosophical approach, which is that because I've already been through the path, I should be able to help you navigate it not only faster, but more effectively. And that there's nothing wrong with saying like, hey, yeah, I've been down there. That's a trap door. Like, don't go down that path or that lane, that alleyway. So I'm curious when and how you came to this realization in choosing that different philosophy, and if you've had any kind of butting of heads with other coaches that are still more beholden to replicating the experience they had, whether they deem it as good or bad.
Yeah, I've had that conversation a lot with people. I sometimes liken it to parenting methods where in at least here in America we talk a lot about the cycle of abuse where like if you were abused as a child, that probably you're going to abuse your kids, right? Because that's somehow normal to you. and in your eyes, you turned out perfectly fine. And so because those are the crappy things that I had to go through to forge this, then I'm going to put you through that,
right.
you know? And it's kind of the same thing in martial arts. You know, some people look at it, they look at, and like you said, in the military, like I became this, you know, awesome specimen of, you know, military might or martial arts prowess. And I did that through all of this, this crap I had to go through. And so because of that, I'm gonna send you on the same path
right.
that I traveled, so you can fall in the same holes, you can get the same injuries, you know, you can, and then you'll come to the same conclusion that I do, right? That I did.
Yeah.
So along my journey, right? We already discussed that I've come to the conclusion that that the majority of people aren't like me. Right. There were times where when I first came to California, that I was spending 25 hours a week training martial arts, and specifically training one aspect of martial arts, and then spending another few hours a week maintaining my other areas. Right. And I was on top of working, you know, a 50 to 60 hour work week job. And finding time to eat and sleep, right? I literally did not have anything else in my life at that time that was 100% of my focus. I was described as a fanatic. That was what it was. I always struggle to find the word, but it was in a seminar setting. The instructor teaching the seminar was my instructor at that time, and he in a negative tone reply or referred to me as a fanatic, and I took it as a compliment, even though I think he meant it.
Right.
Boy, thank you.
So realizing that not everybody is like me, right? They're gonna fall in my pitfalls the same ones that I fell into. And it might crush them, you know. It might be like,
interesting.
I can't do this. I shouldn't do this. I had a neck injury years and years ago that the doctors told me I'd never do martial arts again, right? And many people would have just done what their doctor told them to do and stopped, right? And so if I can sit and go rolling back the clocks, like if I could take that neck injury out of the mix. You know?
Yeah, right.
I don't know that I would because I took a lot away from that experience and it directed my training in a way that where I came to some conclusions and some epiphanies that I may not have come to had I not had that experience, or at least not as quickly. And so I paid for that information, I feel, with parts of my physical well-being. And it's my responsibility, I feel, as a guide, right? So as a coach, I feel like another way to say coach is guide. I'm going to guide you along this path. And it's important to me as the guide to make sure that while we're walking this path, that you don't trip and fall and break things, that you know that, hey, around this corner up here, there's a pitfall. And it's a blind corner, so you can't see it. So we need to be careful and slow down a little bit when we're coming around this corner because we need to navigate that hole, right? That's my job as a guide.
Right.
And so the same thing in martial arts is that my job there is also to make sure that you don't slow your progress, because that took me out of martial arts for a year. That neck injury, you know, I was out for a year. I literally could do nothing besides sit on the sidelines. Watch video footage and visualize. I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't even do a push-up, you know? And so that might make a person quit altogether.
Right.
You know, like it's not worth it. And so I want to try to let that that client avoid that at all costs, right? And so that's my job. If I spent, an exorbitant amount of time working on something that turned out to be fruitless, right? It's my responsibility as a coach. If I see a client start working on that path, to say no, that's okay, but you're going to waste your time there. Here's what I learned.
Right.
And so like I said to you before, that my job, having that experience ahead of me, is to let you learn from it. That's part of my value as a coach, I feel, or as an instructor, is to let you learn from my experiences. What took me, 5 years to cement, right, into my my movements in my brain, it should take you less than that.
Yeah.
Assuming you have the same work ethic that I had, right? It should take you less time. Or, it should take you less effort to achieve what I achieved in the same amount of time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I feel. I think a lot of people, they have that, and I just use the term cycle of abuse. It happened to me, so I'm going to make it happen to you, so that you can then learn from it. Some, like we discussed, some clients are different. Some people just don't hear you until the bad thing happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I was teaching Holly yesterday, and I had a student that, essentially for the most of the class, I was telling him, like, you can't defend that attack with your weapon, because when the person's swinging at you hard, they're going to hit that weapon, and the weapon's going to hit you in the head. And I probably told him 10 times during the class.
Right.
So sometimes you just have to let people get hit in the head, And so there's sometimes that they're not ready for the information, or whatever the reason is, their monkey brain is overriding their analytical brain, and they don't possess the ability to listen to you at that moment. But for the most part, I should be able to save you those injuries and those setbacks and those wrong turns where you seemingly waste a bunch of time going in the wrong direction, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you make a great point too. That goes back to the earlier theme of the conversation of, you have to be considering the different individualizations and character traits of those you're working with, because a CrossFit coach might do this killer workout for a first-timer client, and there may be some that sort of come away from that realizing, like, wow, that was like, I want more of that beatdown, and others that are like, you know what, like, I felt like crap the rest of my day, I don't want any more of that. And if you're not catering to that latter half, then you've missed the opportunity to affect more people and ultimately deliver the value that I would hope you would believe is inherent to this thing that you're coaching.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's if you put that in a martial arts context, there's some students that they want the hard sparring, the hard fighting. They want it as close to realistic as they can. They don't care if you give them a fat lip or a bloody nose, or they're limping around the next day, as long as they know that they got the hardest training they could get. And then you have other people who are like, man, I could barely walk up the stairs to my bedroom.
Right.
I don't want to feel that ever again.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to cater and adjust the training to both of those people, or else you miss the opportunity to have a broader impact on people in general.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the interest of time, we will transition to our rapid fire questions. As I tell all guests, don't put too much pressure on yourself to be too rapid. It's more of a reminder to myself that I'm going to continue to throw them at you one after another, as opposed to jumping in and unpacking it with you.
Okay.
So first, In what ways are you hard on yourself as a coach?
Like we already discussed, I think I'm hard on myself when my clients aren't picking things up in a timely fashion, right? So I'm really hard on myself to make sure that I'm varying the way the message is delivered, or the teaching method, for instance, so that I can make sure that I can affect the broadest range of people, right? That's probably my biggest critique of myself constantly is having those 7 different ways to show somebody something, because one of them might, the one I like might not make sense to them, and so I'm pretty hard on myself to be the best coach that I can be. I'm pretty hard on myself in general about everything, to be the best that I can be at everything. That's impossible, but I try my best to be the best coach I can be, to be the best practitioner I can be, to be the best, this, that, and the other thing, so I'm pretty hard on myself when it comes to that. So I'm constantly learning. That's probably where I'm most hard on myself, because I think that there's people out there that, regardless of who they train under, they're going to become great. Like you take somebody like a Rich Froning,
right,
and that guy's going to be a monster regardless of what CrossFit gym he ever attended. The tough one is the guys that you don't see at the games, the people that they don't have a lot of athletic prowess, they don't have a lot of genetic capabilities or whatever. And it's like, can you still take that person? And I think that's the real mark of a coach, is can you take the person that maybe is not preordained to be great, and can you make them better?
Yeah.
It's not about can you make them great, it's can you make them better, and I think that's where I really hold myself to the fire, so to speak, as a coach,
Love it. What element, characteristic, or personality trait do you bring to coaching, mentoring, or leading that people would least expect or may be seen as odd?
Wow, I don't know. I think that's a tough question. I think after people get to know me, nothing is odd anymore. Man, that's a really tough question. I don't think I have. I think probably I like to joke around a little bit. Some people that meet me initially, I seem people have used the term intimidating to describe me until they get to know me.
Right.
And so I think that it's surprising to people initially when they start to see that I am fun, that I'm more approachable, that I joke around a little bit.
Yeah.
That I will, I'll lighten training up a little bit by poking fun and joking with people, and but at the same time, I'm very serious about what we're doing here. And for me, everything's about self-defense. Everything's about the ultimate goal is that I want my clients to be safer when they leave my class than they were when they showed up. Right. And so at first, I think that comes across. I maybe come across as unapproachable at first, very serious, very intense, very intimidating, I guess. But then the people that know me know that's completely not the case, and that I am very serious about. This is a dangerous world, and the recent events are
illuminating of that.
Yeah, they illuminate that. And we have to think about that all the time. Different people train for different reasons. Some people just train for exercise. Some people train because it's an interesting hobby for them. But and I cater to those people. But the underlying message is always, let's be more effective. And I think I put that out there, and then it becomes, people realize that I'm a little bit lighter than I am, but still serious. I try to be a little bit of both. So that's a really tough question.
No, that's good. Yeah.
I don't want to get off track.
You got some silliness that takes, people are unsure of at first.
Yeah.
All right. Last two. Describe an interesting or difficult challenge for you as a child.
You sent me some prep questions, and I really thought on that, and I'm like, man, I would say the only real I didn't, grow up in the dirt or anything. I mean, I've had a pretty good life. My mother for a time was a single mom with me, and she took care of me. She made sure that I never had to deal with anything horrible. I had a pretty darn good life, growing up, and so I really struggled with this question, trying to come up with something. I would probably say my brother and I have different fathers, right? So he's my half brother, and his father. His father, my stepfather, never really, he always called me son. I always called him dad, and he adopted me on paper, but I was never treated as his son, like my brother always got, a definite difference in the way he was treated versus the way I was treated. And so I think I struggled a lot as a child, trying to earn that. Like I felt like I needed to earn that, I guess maybe earn that love or earn that recognition. And I think that's probably, that pales in comparison to most struggles that people have had. But I think that was a thing for me was I felt like I was trying to earn that from him when I really shouldn't have needed to, but that formed me that formed my way of doing things, trying hard to earn, that feeling of pride, from him. And for the most part, feeling like I failed, to do that, and he passed away at a very young age, from a heart attack. He was, I think, 36. And on my brother's side of the family, there's a high cholesterol, high blood pressure history. And most of the adults on that side of the family have died of heart attacks, And his father died at 36 years old. And the day that he died, he was supposed to, the day that I found him, so I found him. And it was early in the morning. He was supposed to take me to a martial arts tournament that day. And nobody, my brother wasn't competing. It was just me. And he had never been before. And I was 16, I think. And he'd been essentially my father since I was maybe 6, 5 or 6 years old. And he had never taken me to a martial arts competition ever. And that morning, that was the day he was supposed to take me to. He always saw the trophies and stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
And he always said a good job, attaboy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he had never seen me, never gone. And that was the day that he was supposed to take me. And I got up that morning and found him on the kitchen floor.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Yeah, pretty crazy. And so that was supposed to be my validation that day,
Oh,
so that's probably, I could say that's probably the worst thing for me as a child, and a positive male role model in my life. The only real one was my karate instructor.
Yeah.
And he was like my big brother. I borrowed his car to go to my junior prom. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it also brings a good point about just the role that certain coaches can play in essentially filling some of those voids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, what does it mean to you to practice what you preach?
Oh, well, I mean, any coach or mentor or anything. I mean, if you hope to get somebody to perform the way that you want them to, you need to be that example. I hate that do as I say, not as I do,
right.
Mentality. It's like I love the people throw this quote around, be the change that you want to see in the world, right? And that's the thing. It's like I can't expect you to do something I'm not willing to do, and a lot of that came from my time as a leader in the military. You have to be able to set that example for other people. You need to, especially children, right? We say a lot, monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah. Children
get in that mindset where they're only going to do what you do. They're not going to do what you say. They're going to do what you do.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it, they're going to do it. So like when you came to my school, right? A lot of the stuff we do is very eclectic, but we put a lot of respect and a lot of bowing and stuff. Bowing this, respect to the mat, to the training area, respect to your partners. And we put a lot of that stuff in. And not that it's super, super important for the adults. It is, but it's not as important as it is for the children.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so we have all the adults do that because we want the children to see all the adults doing it and going, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
So, practicing what I preach, like I'm not demonstrating my belief in it if I don't do it, and so, yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's huge. Obviously there's caveats to that. If I've got somebody that's cutting down or dieting for a competition to get down to a certain weight and I'm not, right? Obviously going to tell them to do some things that I'm not going to do. I'm going to go have a big nasty cheeseburger with bacon on it, and they're going to eat a salad.
But I'll support them in the struggle of that.
That's right.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us today. I have taken a lot of good notes here that will live at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. But in the meantime, where can people find your martial arts academy on the internet? Where do you hang out on the internet?
Yeah, we're located in San Diego, in the Mira Mesa area. And, our website is www.rebellion-academy.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Rebellion Academy. I've also got a coaching page there. Jeff Baldwin is my professional page on Facebook as well. We also have an online training resource that we're building as we speak. I think, Jared, you're a member on there. Yep. We ran into some hiccups with some filming because of a lack of a camera for a little bit of time, but we've corrected that. And
I know how that goes.
yeah, right. And so we've got an online training resource. It's training online, so you can find it on our website, Rebellion Training Online. But basically, if you want to get training under me, you got to basically come to San Diego, or you got to bring me to you, or you got to find it online.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it's pretty tough for me to get away from San Diego these days because I teach the majority of the classes, and so somebody asked me the other day, like, do you take vacations? And I laughed at them.
What? Vacation? What's that?
Right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. Super interesting stuff, and I'm really excited to unpack this whole idea of being, the professor versus the coach and finding the balance between the two of that. So thank you again. And for those of you listening, if you've been following along with the show, we would super appreciate if you could head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. This is how it helps the show to be put in front of more people so that we can have more conversations with awesome people like Jeff.
Until next time.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. If you have enjoyed what you listened to, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. More information on each episode and the podcast in general can be found at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. We'll catch you next time.